Hey guys, this is Awesome Presentations. In today's video, I will teach you how to create the simplified version of this animation. The speedometer, we will go through the basics of the rotation and how to create this awesome looking car animations. So stay tuned, it's going to be simple 5 steps, easy to understand, and hopefully you will enjoy doing this slide on your own. So let's get into it. Let's start with how to draw the clock shield of the speedometer and the needle. It's quite straightforward, so let's start with the sections first. You simply insert the circle. If you hold Shift key and just drag the circle, it will always draw you a perfect circle. Now, the second thing you want to do is to draw an edges of your sections, where it starts and where it ends. For that, you can use rectangles. Let's say this is the size I would like to have my speed shield to be. And the next thing you want to do is you want to cut that piece of your circle. You can simply do it by highlighting the circle first, then holding Ctrl key, highlight both rectangles, go to shape format, merge shapes, subtract. The second thing is how to create this inner section, inner cut. For that, insert another circle, holding Shift, you can draw a perfect circle. You place it the way you think your speedometer would look best. Again, click the first object, hold Ctrl key, click the second object, go to shape format, merge shapes, subtract. The last thing that is missing are the subsections. So you can do it in a couple of different things. The one I use and the one I recommend is to just draw a rectangle by clicking Insert, Shapes, Rectangle, then make it very thin and place it in a way you would like your sections to be cutted by holding, and then you can just copy the rectangle and draw next sections. Then similarly how we removed the inner circle, just click on the first object, click on two next objects, and now instead of subtract, just do fragment. This will allow you to have every section being separate after you remove the residual, just like that. So you can see each object is separate. So once we understood how this back of your speedometer is done, the needle is quite straightforward. So the needle itself is triangle, and the center is simply a circle. And what you can do is, for the circle, you can mark the shape outline as white, very wide, and then you make the effect like you see on my original graphic. So this is how we came up with those separate objects. You can see once I highlighted, every object is separate. It's quite straightforward and very simple to draw. You can choose the sizes of the sections by your own. You can just follow what I did, where every section is the same size. Since we understood how the objects were drawn, how we can focus on understanding the motion of our objects. So the key is to make the needle move across the section of our speedometer, and still its center to remain unchanged. So let's see what happens when we try to rotate the needle itself. So when you click on our triangle, you can see there is this circular arrow on the top of the object. And once you left click on it, it changes to the circle of arrows. What you can do is you can see how this object would rotate. So let's give it a try. So you can see how it deviates away from the center, away from the circle that we have in the middle of our speedometer. That's something we definitely want to avoid. The key to understand how this behaves is that the rotation happens across the center of your object. So if you have an irregular object like this, it will always deviate from the center of something with a perfect axis. So let's see what are our options. We can try to join the object with another object and change its center for the rotation. So let's give it a try and join it with the circle that is drawn on the top of it and see how it will behave. So to join, just select two objects by holding Ctrl and then click Ctrl G to connect them. Now you can see this new area that highlights our joint objects. And now we can see how the rotation behaves. Let's see slowly how it moves. We can see that this didn't really help it even make the entire effect worse. So what are our other options to do? Since we know that object will always rotate within around the center of its object, there is no point of joining the bigger object, which is the needle, with the smaller object, which is the small circle. The way around it, to keep the needle in the center all the time, is to draw a bigger object on top of it, and that will be our circle. So I'm going to draw a circle. Let me remove the fill. In fact, there will be no fill. I'm putting it on exactly on the top of my needle and the small circle. I want the small circle to be exactly in the center. You can see those guidelines that shows you exactly how your object is placed, and now it's perfectly fine. So now what I want to do is I'm gonna highlight the needle, I'm gonna highlight the smaller circle, and on top of that I'm gonna click on the big circle around it. So that basically I'm putting the needle drawn within the circle. Now Ctrl G, and let's see how this object will react. If this group of objects will react if I try to rotate it. And this is exactly what I wanted to achieve. The middle circle remains the same, in the same spot all the time. So the key to rotation like that and keep the center object exactly in the center all the time is just to draw it within the bigger object. You can now change the color of that to be more pleasant, of the outer circle to light gray. And now we can move to step 3. Okay, the step 3 will be move on the idle. And let me show you what I exactly mean by that on the original slide. So when we start the slide, you can see that on our speedometer, the needle just moves just a little bit back and forth, back and forth. Imagine you are sitting in a sports car on the red light, and so your engine always gonna have some RPMs, and that's the illusion we will try to recreate right now. It will always remain like that until you're gonna click and proceed to the next animation. So let's try to recreate something like that. So I did make a small modification compared to the previous slide. So in here you can see our group is pointing to the top of the slide, and I know that because when I click on the group of our objects that we created just a second ago, I have the rotation option on the top of it that gives you an indication to which direction the object is skewed to. So what I did now on the previous slide, I just rotated that object slightly to the left and moved the needle to point the beginning of the speedometer. That's the only modification I did. It's going to make the further animation slightly easier. So just recreate that on your end, and let's move on. So what we need to do now is we need to add the animation. For that, let's click on our group of objects, go to animation section, and now we need to figure out how to slightly make that needle to move. It's going to be really an illusion that needle move itself. It's the entire group of objects that needs to rotate a little bit. So within animation there is an spin within emphasizers. Let's click on that and let's see how it looks like. Okay, it gives us kind of what we are trying to achieve, although we don't really want to needle to move all the way around. We just want to give it a little nudge and go back. So let's see what by default this spin did to our animation. To do that, to see the details, you click on the animation pane, and the animation pane will slide from the right hand side. And what we are seeing here is that automatically the animation happened on the click of the mouse. It lasts for 2 seconds. And if we right click on it and go to effect options, we see that it's doing 360 degrees spin clockwise. Let's see what would happen if we make the duration of the animation instead of 2 seconds. We would do it, for example, half second. Happen much quicker. Okay. Now the next step we want to do is we still want to keep the clockwise path of movement, but 360 is too much. Let's try just 1 degree and see what happens. Okay, it did move just a little. Let's see on the big screen how it did. There's a little nudge. It's kind of what we are after, but still not exactly what we wanted. So let's open the options again. What we want to do is we want to do auto reverse. What that means, the needle will go 1 degree and gonna come back to its initial position. Let's see how this looks like now on the big screen, and goes back. Okay, that's good. Now what we want to do, we want to create keep this effect endless at least until we're gonna move to another animation. For now we have just 1 nudge and go back. So let's see what we can do about it. Right click on the animation, effect options. So if you go to timing, you can choose the repeat. You can choose here how many times the animation will repeat itself, and here we're going to choose until the next click. Let's see what happens now. So we click, and you see it keeps moving back and forth, back and forth. So this is exactly what we wanted to achieve. The last small detail to this animation is that this motion is a little bit clunky, and you can see that when you look at it on the big screen. Just go back and forth, like very unnatural way, I would say, for the speedometer. The way to fix it is if you set it as smooth end and smooth starts around the middle, then it's going to smooth out the motion on the start and the end. Let's see how it looks like now. Okay, I think that's decent. The last thing we want to do is to remove this on-click animation as a trigger. We want this animation to start exactly with the start of the slide. So for that, instead of on-click, you choose the event as with previous. So now whenever we open the slide, you can see it starts moving already when you move to the slide, when you open the slide. So having that, we can move to step 4. Okay, step 4 now. So we have our graphics drawn. We have the initial motion on idle, where the needle just move back and forth just a little bit. Now what we want to do is we want to move that needle between the sections to highlight each of the points we want to make when presenting the slide. So we want to move it from the idle to the middle of the section. It's quite straightforward. You highlight the object and you open the animation pane just to have a good overlook on how your animations look like. What we want to do now is we want to add another rotation to this animation. You cannot just simply choose the spin again or choose any other animation again, because you will automatically replace the existing animation. If you want to add an animation on top of existing animation, what you need to do is you need to click this nifty option, which is add animation. We're gonna choose spin again. And now you can see we keep the initial idle move, and we just created another row that we can play around with. So we know already a couple of things on how the spin moves, reacts, and what are the bits and pieces of how to set it up. So we're going to build on that information. So again, we right click on the motion we just added, effect options. We know that currently it moves the full circle, which is 360 degrees clockwise. Clockwise we want to keep. You can always change it to counterwise if you have a speedometer going the other way, or for whatever animation you want to do it. Now we need to move it just a little bit. And now, depending on the speedometer you have, and depending on the amount of sections and the size of sections you have, you need to experiment a little bit with how far your needle needs to be pushed. And the way you experiment with it, you open this amount section and you put a custom amount. So let's see what happens if I put 20%. Okay. It moves just a little bit. It moves around to the center of our section. I want my section to be those two objects. So the center kind of works for me. So let's see how this would look like if I open the full size slide. We see then a move on idle. Now I click and the needle moves to the middle. So it does exactly what I wanted it to do. Good. Now, what we can do on top of that? What we can do is we can keep the move like within a sports car, that you hit a single level of RPM, but even if you drive a regular car, you know that your RPMs can oscillate within a certain range, but they will not be a steady number. And we want to kind of keep that illusion. So we want to move it up, but still moving up and down just a little bit, up and down within the range we are highlighting. So for that, what I will do with our animation, I will edit the 20% and I will slightly move it slightly higher by 40%. So let's see how far it's gonna go. It goes to the edge of the section. And this is great. This is great for me because now what I want to do is I want to add one more animation to it. Let me show you what I'm planning to do. To add one more animation, we'll just follow the steps I described just a minute ago. You click on the group and you click Add Animation in the animation section of PowerPoint. And we're going to add spin one more time. That's the third time we are adding spin to our animation. Now, I wanted the animation of bouncing within a range to happen after the needle moves to the section. So to do that, I right click on the animation we just added, and I want it to start after previous. Now, what I exactly want to happen after the first animation ends is to move it even further, just by 10%. Sorry, 10 degrees clockwise, and auto reverse. And this will happen. So let's see first what that will do. Sorry, let's play the entire slide. Small idle, move 40%, move 40 degrees and move 10 degrees even more. It's not exactly what I wanted. This 40 degrees is way too far for this to make a good effect. I will cut it to 15. Let's see now. So this is how far it will go, and it's gonna bounce back. Okay. It should be 15. Let's see now. 15. 15. 10% more bounce back. Good. Good. So we got it. Now what we want to do is we want to do it slightly more dynamic. So I'm gonna add a bounce effect around the middle and see how it behaves now. Okay. The big slide. Let's see again. Bounce back slightly and reverse. Okay. Okay, so what I want to do with it now is I want this to happen faster. 2 seconds is too slow. Let's cut it to 1 second. I want to have a smooth start to it, and I want this to be repeated at least until the next click. So let's see how it looks like now. Let's just double check. The angles 15 degrees, 10 degrees. Let's see. I clicked, it moves, and it starts jumping around. then it won't stop until we're gonna do another click, which in our case is the end of the slide. Okay, that's so far so good. So what we exactly want to have happened once the needle points the section, we want the section to be colored with by a very particular color that will suggest that we moved in our process. To do that, I will highlight the two objects, and what I go to the animation section, and what I want to happen is I want the object to change color. Now we can see in animation pane that we have two new animations added. I want this to be around the same length as the original move of the needle, which in our case would be just 2 seconds. So let's give it a try and let's make it 2 seconds. I'm going to do it on click, sorry, with previous. Now, if we keep it after the animation of bouncing the needle, you will see that this will happen after the needle moved, which is not exactly the effect I want to achieve. So let me first show you what has been created. So we click, the needle moves, then it highlights, and then needle started to bounce up and down and up and down. What I want to have instead, I want to those sections to change the color while the needle is moving, and the end changing the color when the needle stops at initial motion. So to do that, I need to highlight those two animations and move it one notch up so that they would start. This animation would exactly start when the needle starts to moving. Let's see how it looks like now. So there's the initial idle move. I click, it highlights, the end highlighting. Now the needle just will keep rotating within the range. Now you can change the color of your animation that you want. By default, it's orange for me because of the color palette I have, but I will change it to the bluish. I'm going to make the change for both of the objects. Let's see how it looks like now. I click, there we go, and it bounces. The next thing I want to do is to move the needle from section 1 to section 2. It's mostly just the repeat of the steps we just performed. So let's just recap what we did. We click on the group of our objects with the needle inside, and we add an animation. We want to add one more spin. The spin will start on click. Now we need to remember that animations in PowerPoint are sequential. What that means, it's gonna perform. The application will perform animation from the top to the bottom, depending on the time when the animation is scheduled. So since it's the next animation is on click, it's correctly set up as start at 0 seconds. That means exactly after the click happens, the animation will kick off. It doesn't mean it will start with the animation that we already started on the first click. It's a sequential, so it's going to independently start after we click just now until we add some more animations to it. Anyway, I will show you exactly what I mean in a second. So what we want to do is we want to edit the options by right-clicking and choosing effect options. Now you need to understand, remember that the next animation will start from the point the previous animation ended. So we know that the previous animation took us from point 0 to around middle of the section and then started bouncing up and down. So our starting point is really middle of the previous section. If you remember what we did, we set the move for 15 degrees. So let me set it for 15 degrees more and let's see what would happen. So this is the initial idle. Highlight and move by 15%, then bounce up and down. Now I click. That will move it for another 15%. Another 15% is clearly not enough to move it to the middle of the section. So this is something you will need to experiment a little bit on your end, depending on your speedometer, how it looks like. I think for us, with this layout, 40 degrees should be just enough. Let's see. Initial move, highlight, bounce up and down. Now I click for the second time. And this is still not enough. We need to push it even further. Let's see. Oh no, sorry. For whatever reason, it saved on 15%. Sorry, 15 degrees. Let's try to make it 40 degrees once again. Let's see how it now looks. Initial, bumps up and down, click. That's another 40 degrees. Exactly, that's the middle of the section. So there are a few things you can do from now. So to add another animation of needle moving within the second section, which is basically repeating the previous animation we did. I mean, we can do that, but there is a better way of manipulating with already animations you have. So if we edit what we did for the bounce up and down effect by right-clicking on the animation, and when we go to timing, you will see that this animation will repeat until next click. What that means is when we started, you can see that now this animation will automatically kick off after initial move and will keep moving until we click. After we click, the needle moved, but here we would need to add the same animation once again to have a needle moving within a section. But instead of doing that, we can edit our existing move, go to timing and say, instead of having repeat until next click, let's do it until end of the slide. So what that means, if we don't have any other animation running, it will add bounce back effect. Let's see exactly how this works. So move up and down, section highlighted. Now I click second time. We move to the second section. And the needle will be moving within the second section, which is exactly what we wanted. And what we need to do now is we need to add colors to our second section. So now, what you can easily do, you can just click on the object that we already have the animation, click Animation Painter, and click on the object we want to have exactly the same animation. Let me do that for two objects. And let's change color to the darker blue. And see how it looks like now. First section. Second section. And then basically you can repeat the same process 3-4 more times to do a complete span of your speedometer. On top of that, you can add flying in text whenever the needle spins, just synchronize it. and the effect would be as the slide here. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial, and now you successfully create this slide on your awesome presentation. Stay tuned for some more inspirations, tutorials, and tricks in PowerPoint. Take care, guys. Have a good one, and speak soon.